dependencies between different levels of domain, as when knowledge at some level builds upon knowledge at lower levels, or when skipping a level impedes the generalization of some knowledge to other situations. So for instance, in the case of Swidget, a user may know how to interact with Swidgets in a list without thinking, such as thread view in the mail application. In this case, it will be a knowledge about UI have to reach the autonomous phase. However, this user may not yet have integrated this knowledge into the habit of using these widgets to delete mails. Here, the user is still in the cognitive phase at the comment and the text level because she does not yet associate automatically the comment delete mail or the need to discard some email with the use of this widget. And a possibility for that is the user has not adopted the workflow consisting quickly deleting all the unwanted mails from the thread view using widget. Instead, they may prefer another workflow. For example, they prefer to look in each mail and decided to delete it with the trash button. Now let's talk about motivations. Different reasons motivate users to improve their current skills. There is a lot to say about, so I was only focused on these 3 points. The first is the distinction introduced by Ryan and Desi. When we do something because we like doing it, it's an intrinsic motivation. For instance, playing a game. But when we do it because we expect some consequence, especially rewards or avoiding of punishment, it's an extrinsic motivation. In HCI, proficiency improvement have mostly been considered as a way to improve users' overall performance, and thus in extrinsic motivations. But to understand SLDs, we should maybe consider more that learning and discovery are enjoyable in themselves and can be intrinsic motivations to explore the interface. Also from Ryan and Desi, the self-determination theory is a framework describing basic needs that humans try to fulfill. Competence is the need to feel in control or the experience mastery. Autonomy is the need to live according to your value and because of your own choices. Relatedness is the need to relate yourself to other people. Obviously, the discovery issue of Swidget is a matter of competence. But could it also be a matter of autonomy and relatedness? Hassan Zhao also presents a model of UX that distinguishes between the pragmatic and the hedonic attribute of a product. Pragmatic attributes concern the practical aspect of a product, the achievement of behavioral goals. Hedonic attributes concern the different sensation that a product can bring to users and related to users' identity. Discovery interaction techniques in the stimulating dimension of his model, a subcategory of hedonic. This could be very relevant to describe the benefit of SLDs. The model of the discovery allowed me to propose 2 contributions that I have used during my thesis. The notion of source of knowledge and the degree of knowledge. The SOK that I call source of knowledge is everything during which a user learns about an affordance of user interface. I propose 2 dimensions to discuss the concept, the distance and intentionality. The distance extends the concept of directness that I defined earlier. It describes broadly how remote the learning situation from an actual usage situation, exploring this knowledge, considering the location of the design means involved. The minimal distance corresponds to non-hidden widgets that directly communicate the knowledge with signifiers like feedforward and perceived affordances. The edge case that I mentioned earlier, such as menu hints, model interfaces, or help queries, are slightly farther. In a region of design space I think is worth exploring deeper. Some SOKs are farther but still in the application. For example, tips that is tip displayed when the application starts. SOK can also be provided by external application on the same device, like the tip apps. Finally, the knowledge can be communicated outside the device through the media, social network, YouTube's tutorials. In this case, we cannot talk about the design means anymore, although designer can also design around the product to communicate about how to use it. There are also 3 different scenarios that explain the intentionality of the discovery. Through explicit research is when users have a precise goal or a problem to solve. Through random exploration and information is where users just want to explore the interface by curiosity. There are also occasions when users learn their knowledge without any intentions. For example, we may discover widgets when we see other people using them. Users' knowledge of an interaction technique is something complex to define and measure. I propose a model to do so that avoid naive approaches while being simply enough to use in the experiment. It characterizes the user's knowledge as one of 4 possible degrees, which are primary, for the technique used spontaneously by a user to perform a task. Productive is for the techniques that a user can think about by themselves and use to perform the task, but will not necessarily use it spontaneously. Receptive is for the technique that a user will not think to use and may not be able to use, but will still recognize and understand if used by someone else. Unknown is techniques that user would not know they exist. In addition, we may say that a technique is used when it's at a primary or productive level for the users, and aware when it's not unknown. Here comes the 2 studies that I have done for knowing more on widgets. The goal of these 2 studies was to provide some answers to the following research question about widgets. Do users know and use them? How do users discover them? And how do users think about them? In order to approach these issues, 2 studies cover different research questions. The first one is a lab study with 28 participants for a face-to-face observation plus interviews to treat the first 2 questions. And later on, an online questionnaire allowed us to reach more participants to find out further details about these 4 questions. These 2 studies have various tasks categorized in 4 different applications: control panel, notification center, SMS, and mail. To keep the study short, we select only a few tasks in each application. For the lab study in blue, at this stage, we only want to compare participant knowledge of widget with that of the other input methods. So we focus on the task with alternatives to use with the widgets. For the online study in pink, we focus more on widgets to know if participants knew them and how they discovered them. The first lab study is the lab study, which I invite participants to our place where I can interview and discuss with them and observe how they interact with the widgets. This study was proceed in 3 parts: the general question, text sections, and interview section that contains demonstrations. After filling out the general question about their background and their experience with iOS devices, participants enter the text section where we observe what they know about the widgets. During this section, I asked participants to show me all the input methods that they know to solve a task. For instance, I asked, do you know how to turn on the Wi-Fi? If they do, then I will keep on asking, do you know other ways to turn on the Wi-Fi? Until they don't know any. I note down the first technique as they use as primary or the others as productive. After doing that for all tasks, In the interview section, I will demonstrate all the techniques that the participant did not use and categorize them as receptive or unknown, whether the participant knew the technique or not. I finally discuss with them about how they feel about Switch-it in general. By this way, we can observe what strategy participants use for their daily tasks. Move on to our result. The result of the 28 participants in this chart shows how participants first solve each task. Failure to complete an operation in the light gray was rather infrequent, with 87% of all operations completed. Primary use of Switch-it in pinkish depends a lot on the task and participant, such as the to delete Switch-it is high, while Marcus' reply mail is low, which is interesting because these mail comments are all in the same Switch-it menu. Switch-it were the most frequent primary interaction type, with 62% of all complete trials. However, the distribution of participants by the number of tasks they complete with the Switch-it as primary was rather unbalanced, suggesting that preference for Switch-it is quite uneven among our participants. This is the distribution chart of the 4 degrees of knowledge that I have mentioned before for Switch-its. Participants were aware of 60% of the trial, but the comparison between the 2 columns on the left show that the awareness depends a lot on the Switch-it. The dark pink is for primary use, which makes the most of the pinkish area. It shows that the participants aware of a Switch-it tend to use it first.